Propositions and motions. The clerk will read the committee report and the minority report on Senate Bill 132.
President Courtney, your Committee on Rules, to whom was referred Senate Bill 132A, having the same under consideration, respectively reports it back recommending do pass the A engrossed bill. President Courtney, a minority of your Committee on Rules, to whom was referred Senate Bill 132A, having had the same under consideration, respectively reports it back recommending do pass with amendments to the A engrossed bill.
Recognize Senator Laurie Montez Anderson.
Mr. President, I move that the committee report on Senate Bill 132 be adopted.
Senator Laurie Montez Anderson has moved the committee report on Senate Bill 132 be adopted. To your motion.
Colleagues, Oregon has the worst rate of the non-medical exemptions from vaccines in the entire United States. It has risen from less than 2% for kindergartners in 2001 to 6.4% in May 2013. In some counties, the rate of non-medical exemption is as high as 12%. In fact, some schools have very high exemption rates, up to 70%. These schools are vulnerable to outbreaks of disease. A school needs a 94% immunization rate to keep the measles virus from spreading and herd immunity in general. We are now below that. This could become a public health crisis. What does Senate Bill 132 specifically do? It simply opens up the exemption language to allow for religious and or for personal or philosophical reasons. It does not limit exemptions. It creates a smart and responsible way to promote informed decision-making among parents and look to encourage parents to talk with their provider about both the benefits and risks of vaccines, as well as about the risks of opting out. It creates an alternative for parents to learn more about vaccines through a simple online educational video that parents can also watch and interact with. Once they complete the video, if they still choose to opt out, the parent can submit a form with his or her signature to their child's school or daycare facility. Because Senate Bill 132 updates our current policy language to expand the reasons that parents can exempt, a legal opinion from Legislative Counsel was sought and received on February 27th. Their opinion found, if enacted into law, Senate Bill 132 would not preclude a parent from declining to have his or her child immunized for religious reasons. However, such a parent, along with any other parent who chooses to decline to have his or her child immunized, would have to either consult a practitioner of the healing arts about the risks and benefits of immunizations or take a vaccine educational module approved by the Oregon Health Authority. By creating a fuller education process about the benefits and risks of vaccines and engaging parents more fully in their decision-making process, Senate Bill 132 aims to lower the non-medical exemption rates to better protect all of Oregon's children from vaccine-preventable diseases. In effect, Senate Bill 132 will close the loophole. Washington State has instituted a physician signature requirement in 2011 and has seen its statewide exemption rates drop by 25% since 2011. Colleagues, the Oregon Pediatric Society came to me with this concept back in August 2012, and we worked many months prior to the 2013 session with Legislative Counsel to get the language you see before you in Senate Bill 132A, which has remained unchanged since it left the Senate Health Care Committee. I worked with a good senator from Central Oregon and the religious community. We had a difficult time coming up with language that was constitutionally legal. But the language you see before you in the minority report is one that the committee considered, but the majority did not adopt it because it did not go far enough to protect public health. The religious exemption in current statute is interpreted as a statement that a child is not immunized under the teachings of a religion. But religion is defined in statute as any system of beliefs, practices, or ethical values. And in practical terms, this means that no reason for exemption is currently required. The parent must simply sign a form waiving the immunizations. While Senate Bill 132 does remove all religious exemption language, it does not affect the exercise of an exemption, whether for religious or other reasons. It simply acknowledges that all exemptions are exemptions and will be treated the same. Parents who do have a sincerely held religious belief will still be able to be exempted. 1 in 20 students are exempted from vaccination due to religious beliefs. It is hard to believe that this many families adhere to religions that discourage immunizations. Instead, parents appear to simply be misusing religion as an excuse not to vaccinate. In fact, right now, it is easier for a parent to sign a paper choosing to exempt than it is for them to get their child's vaccination records for school enrollment purposes. Senate Bill 132 will help to ensure that exemptions are reserved for families who adhere to religious sects that truly discourage vaccination on theological grounds or truly object on other grounds after they have received all the information. School mandates, which have repeatedly been upheld in the courts, are based on the deepest of core American principles. First of all, doing the right thing for individuals and society. It must not do harm. And there's equal protection under the case and under the law. In this case, the right of all people to be protected from disease. Let us remember, we have not seen the ravages that polio inflicted on people before the polio vaccine. We have not seen the deaths that occurred before there was pertussis or tetanus or diphtheria vaccines. My sister is deaf because my mother had the German measles. Thank goodness the nerves to her ears were the only complication that resulted from that disease when my mom was pregnant. Please join me as a longtime Oregon healthcare provider in voting yes on Senate Bill 132A to create healthier children in Oregon. Thank you, Mr. President.
Recognize Senator Tim Knopp.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move the minority report be substituted for the committee report on Senate Bill 132.
Senator Tim Knopp has moved that the minority report be substituted for the committee report on Senate Bill 132. To your motion.
Thank you, Mr. President. Colleagues, the difference between the committee report and the minority report are quite simple. The majority report tramples the religious freedom embodied in the Oregon Constitution. The minority report does not. I read to you Article 1, Section 3 of the Oregon Constitution. No law shall in any case whatever control the free exercise, the enjoyment of religious opinions, or interfere with the rights of conscience. Colleagues, the majority report takes an extreme action by eliminating the religious freedom in our laws without any major attempt to provide education to achieve the proponent's stated goal. The reason, colleagues, that we have the number one or that we're number one in non-medical exemptions is because the only exemption that exists in law today is in fact a religious exemption. Do people use that beyond religion? They probably do. However, the minority report provides for a religious exemption while at the same time providing what the proponents want, which is to educate people further. But the majority report forces people who don't have a particular interest in going to a doctor and wouldn't adhere to that advice anyway to either do that or to watch education, which they're not going to take advantage of anyway, which I do believe is an infringement upon their right. So not only did Washington do this, but also California did. And colleagues, on your desk, there's a letter from the great governor, the liberal Democratic governor from California, who writes in his letter, I will direct the department to allow for a separate religious exemption on the form. In this way, people whose religious beliefs preclude vaccinations will not be required to seek healthcare practitioner's signature. Now, they pursued a separate and different bill than we did, and they're essentially forcing everybody to go through a medical practitioner. We're adding an element of education module through the Oregon Health Authority. However, still, they provide for a separate religious exemption. So as liberal as Governor Jerry Brown is, it makes me wonder what we're doing here in this majority report. The minority report does not do that. In fact, it follows in the same spirit as the governor from California, and it is my belief that the minority report is much more legally defensible and less likely to be struck down by the courts. I urge you to support the minority report that gives our citizens the religious opinion and expression and the right of conscience that our Constitution provides. Colleagues, we have an opportunity to, I think, have a good bill through the minority report, and I believe that ultimately that the majority report would be struck down because there will be lawsuits because of it, and the surest constitutional provision that you have before you to have a religious exemption and education is in fact embodied in the minority report. So colleagues, I urge you to support the minority report to Senate Bill 132.
We're now in the discussion of the minority report. Recognize Senator Jeff Cruz.
Thank you, Mr. President and colleagues. I rise in support of the minority report, and we keep hearing about how Oregon has such terrible vaccination rates. According to the CDC, kindergartners enrolled in the 2011-2012 school year, we have a vaccination rate of between 93.7 and 95%. Colleagues, we're reaching a point of statistical certainty because you never get to 100%. I fully understand that. So what we're chasing here is not an overwhelming problem. I think we are doing a really good job of vaccination. Now, admittedly, there are some pockets in the state we know that the rates are lower, and I fully understand that. The problem what we're doing here is in an attempt to do something wonderful, we're trampling on the Constitution, and that's absolutely wrong. The Constitution is what it is, and it's there for a reason, and one of the things that it does, as the previous speaker mentioned, is it protects religious freedom. Now, you and I may disagree with some people's views, but that is their right. Okay, and I'm not going to stand here and make a moral judgment on somebody else's belief system. I absolutely will not do that. But the majority report on this bill does. It basically says, regardless of your religion, we're going to force you to do this, whether you believe it or not. You know, this country was bounded on the concept of freedom. The Constitution of the United States and the Constitution of the State of Oregon are designed for one primary purpose, and that's to protect the people from government. Pure and simple. As the previous speaker mentioned, he read what's in the Constitution. That is to protect people from actions of government. The minority report is unconstitutional, and it's trying to get at a core problem that I don't think exists to the level some people think it does. The minority report honors the diversity we have in this state, honors the freedom of religion, and still will help make sure that those who choose to have their children vaccinated will have that ability, and those who, for reasons that we may or may not agree with, choose not to, have that freedom to make that choice. I urge and I vote on the minority report.
Further discussion on the minority report? Senator Knope, do you wish to close? So we're now going to vote on the substitution of the minority report for the committee report. That is what the vote is on. The question now arises upon the substitution of the minority report for the committee report. All those in favor will answer aye as their names are called, and all those opposed, no. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Roeblen? Rosenbaum? Shields? Starr, Steiner Hayward, Thompson, Whitsitt, Winters, Bearsugar, Bates, Byer, Boquist, Burdick, Close, Devlin, Dingfelder, Edwards, Ferrioli, George, Girard, Hansel, Hass, Johnson, Knope, Cruz, Monis Anderson, Monroe, Olson, Brzezinski, President Courtney.
No.
Excused, Bearsugar, voting no, Bates, Byer, Burdick, Devlin, Dingfelder, Edwards, Hass, Johnson, Monis Anderson, Monroe, Brzezinski, Roblin, Rosenbaum, Shields, Steiner Hayward, President Courtney. 13 aye votes.
The minority report has failed. In accordance with SR 8.602, the Senate will take action immediately on the third reading of Senate Bill 132 as amended by the committee report. The clerk will read the bill.
Senate Bill 132, relating to immunization of school children and declaring an emergency.
Senator Girard, you wish to okay, thank you. I recognize Senator Elizabeth Steiner Hayward, please.
Thank you, Mr. President. To the bill?
To the bill, please.
Thank you. Colleagues, my esteemed colleague from Fairview, Gresham, Troutdale, and Wood Village has outlined a lot of the reasons for this. I'm going to go over some of them again and address some of the concerns that were raised in the minority report. First of all, Oregon's immunization rate is getting worse. It went up almost a full percentage rate, the lack of immunization for kindergartners between 2011 and 2012. That's a huge problem that this bill will help to address. In some school districts, the exemption rate for kindergarten is as high as 70%. Immunizations are a very safe way to keep children and families safe from what used to be devastating diseases. And it's critical. More than half of infants less than a year of age who get pertussis or whooping cough are hospitalized. 1 in every 500 children who get measles will die from the illness. Both are highly contagious diseases. Not only do immunizations help protect the children who personally receive them, they also protect the most medically vulnerable among us. Some children with certain forms of cancer are getting treatment that preclude them from getting immunizations for significant reasons. They need to be protected by other people having the immunizations. Herd immunity, this concept that everybody's protected if most people are protected, only works when we're at a rate of at least 94%. We are now below that rate, colleagues, below that rate necessary for herd immunization. We will not be able to protect their children. In 2012, 910 cases of whooping cough were documented in Oregon. This is the highest rate seen in our state since the 1950s and almost triple the rate seen in 2011. It's going to get worse if we don't fix our falling immunization rates. Why are they falling? Mostly lack of information, lack of accurate information. We heard testimony from physicians in committee about treating patients who believe that vaccines cause autism, which has been recanted by the primary author of the paper that put it forward. Mercury poisoning, which isn't an issue anymore since mercury-laden preservatives have been largely removed from immunizations, or diabetes. There was even testimony about a patient who believed that eating organic food provided the same health benefits as vaccination. Now, clearly, these beliefs are unfounded. I can tell you, however, as a primary care physician who has spent her career focusing on prevention, that these beliefs are all too common. I can also tell you that many of my patients express frustration about not knowing where to go to get reliable information about the health benefits and the accurate information about immunization. We have celebrities who are purporting to know more about immunization than the Centers for Disease Control, physicians, or any other reliable authority. Currently, as you've heard, Oregon law gives parents 3 options: before enrolling their child in a school or in childcare, they must either submit a form signed by a medical practitioner verifying that their child has received the vaccines, submit a form signed by a medical professional saying they're exempt due to health reasons, or submit a form saying that their child is exempt for religious reasons. As has been pointed out, there are two important things about this religious exemption. It's very broad. The exemption does not require that the person seeking such an exemption be actively practicing a faith with tenets that prohibit vaccination. Because of the way we define religious in Oregon, or religion, a person merely has to attest that they have some philosophical explanation problem with it. Currently, people are using this exemption who really don't follow a religion. There is nothing in the current bill that differs from what the senator from Central Oregon pointed out as being in the letter from Governor Brown. The letter from Governor Brown says that there needs to be an opportunity for people to get this exemption for a religious reason without seeking the signature of a healthcare professional. That is completely included in the current version, the version that we are considering of Senate Bill 132A. They either need a signature from a medical profession or the certificate of completion of an online training course. I understand that there is a percentage of Oregonians, a small percentage, surely smaller than 6%, who reject the practice of immunization based on their religious beliefs. I am a deeply religious person and the member of a religious minority, smaller than some of these other religious minorities in Oregon who reject this. And I absolutely believe that those beliefs should be respected and believe that a religious exemption must be maintained, as is true in Senate Bill 132A. However, as a physician and a scientist, I worry that most people who use the religious exemption currently are doing so because of pseudoscientific misinformation and not because of their faith. We've worked hard, as the senator from the eastern part of the Multnomah County mentioned, to craft a bill that respects all of these interests. There will be an informed consent process, just as there is for any other major medical decision that we ask people to make. It will be accurate. They either go online and complete the module, or they get a signature from their healthcare provider. It's very simple. Washington passed this law in 2011 and have already seen a 25% decrease in their non-immunization rate in young children. You can still exempt for religious reasons. I want to be crystal clear about this. Colleagues, this is about protecting the health of our youngest Oregonians, our most vulnerable Oregonians, and still respecting the religious rights of those who hold a firm belief based on their tenets that this is unacceptable. I urge your aye vote. Thank you.
We're now on to the discussion. Recognize Senator Fred Girard.
Thank you, Mr. President. Colleagues, we're going down a really bad pathway here. Not only are we stomping on the First Amendment rights, the freedom of religion, we are actually stomping on the right of a person to dictate their own health care. We are tromping on the rights of a parent to dictate what's best for their kids. We are elevating doctors to gods. And I'm a dentist. I have a doctorate degree. I'll be the first to tell you, in my practice, I have made mistakes. I've made a lot of them in the course of my career. That just happens, you know? And everyone has a right to either come to me or not come to me, but we do make mistakes. Doctors, let me give you a couple examples. The early polio vaccinations, that was supposed to be safe. They caused a lot of people to have polio. That was a live virus that was actually injected. They used to use a drug called flutamide, which was commonly used by physicians. It caused a tremendous number of birth defects. Think about, is eggs, the question, when you eat an egg in the morning, is that good for you or bad for you? Crud, that thing has gone up and down faster than I can shake a stick at. I still don't know if it's good or bad for me. I like eggs, but doctors can't, you know, they told us for a long time that we should get off of the cholesterol that's in the eggs. Every time you inject a person, there is a probability of anaphylactic shock. You're looking at someone that almost died from anaphylactic shock. Now, it might not be the drug that they're injecting. Usually, it's the preservative that's in the drug. So people have a religious right, and a right to their body, and a right to their kid's body to say, no, I don't want this. Now, if they do that, I have no problems with them knowing the risks. That, look, this might be a good thing, and statistically speaking, this is probably a good way for you to go. But I am not going to make doctors any more gods than what we have made this session. We have gone down absolutely terrible pathways with the Tanning bill and various other bills, and this bill is the King Kong of them all. So I think if you're questioning about how you're going to vote, and you think if you think doctors should be made gods, then look at what happened in the fluoride debate up in Portland and the vote count up there. People said resoundingly they want the right to make their own decision. And that's what we should be doing here. Thank you.
Recognize Senator Diane Rosenbaum, please.
Thank you, Mr. President. Colleagues, I rise in support of Senate Bill 132, which I think has been admirably explained already. Since the bill did move out of the Rules Committee most recently, I did want to just add a couple of comments. I think there's been a certain amount of hyperbole about what this bill does, and I think the most important thing about the bill is that it addresses a true crisis in the health of Oregon children. I think all of my colleagues know that it took a little while for this bill to finally come to a vote before you today. And during that time, actually, the rate of exemption to vaccinations in Oregon went from slightly below 6% to where it is today at 6.4%. So I think you can see that not only do we have the highest rate of children not getting vaccinated in the country, but that number is growing. And to me, that demonstrates that there really is a crisis in protecting our children's health that needs to be addressed. But it's important to note that the way in which this bill does this protects the rights of people, families, Oregon families who do not wish to vaccinate for all sorts of reasons, whether it's religious reasons or health reasons or whatever their personal objections are. The bill provides two alternative ways to get the exemption, and one of them is going to a doctor and talking to a doctor. The other is simply watching a video that's based on the best science that the Centers for Disease Control has available so that people can make informed decisions about their children's health. Just on a personal note, I think if you've known somebody who has been exposed to one of these childhood diseases, a lot of which were actually things that when I was a kid we just got and people got sick, but I have recently seen pregnant women get whooping cough and be unable to have it treated because of their pregnancy. That jeopardizes unborn children in ways that is totally unnecessary. So I think as you've heard from our doctors and nurses on the floor, we do need to make a change. This bill respects the rights of people who do not want to vaccinate by just letting them get information before they make that decision, but much more importantly, it takes a crucial step to protect our children's health, our children's future, and the good of the state of Oregon, and I urge your aye vote. Thank you, Mr. President.
Recognize Senator Jeff Cruz.
Thank you, Mr. President. First, I'd like to make a correction in a statement I made during the debate on the minority report when I said inadvertently that the minority report was unconstitutional. In reality, it's the majority report or the bill itself that's unconstitutional. I just wanted to put that on the record. What's interesting, we talk about is there an increase in or a decrease in the rate of vaccination? Maybe, but we're talking about a couple tenths of a percentage point, which is an actuarial anomaly, and yet we're calling that a crisis? Excuse me? I don't think we are dealing with a crisis. I'd also point out that in 1986, Congress created the Vaccine Injury Compensation Program to protect vaccine manufacturers and doctors from liability for bad things that happen with vaccinations. Since that point in time, there have been 14,544 injury claims and 1,104 deaths due to vaccine. What it has cost the government is over $2.6 billion to satisfy those claims. So to say that this is necessarily a panacea, actually the statistics show otherwise. But the bottom line is, are vaccines a good idea? For most people, they are. But once again, we're talking about parental choice. And I am getting very tired of this legislative assembly and this body taking away the choices of parents as to how they raise their kids.
Recognize Senator Doug Whitsitt.
Thank you, Mr. President. This is a very difficult vote for me. I spent my entire professional life promoting the vaccination of my clients' animals. Spent tens of thousands of dollars of my own personal funds on education seminars and printing literature to encourage people to vaccinate their pets and to vaccinate their farm animals. No one in this building, I'm confident, has administered more doses of vaccine than I have. Sometimes 2,000 to 3,000 doses a day, day in and day out, for months on end. And Senator Cruz is right. Occasionally, a vaccination causes a reaction. And sometimes those reactions are fatal. I still believe that vaccination is a good thing. I have spent a great deal of time and effort and money, and I will continue to do so, promoting vaccination. But at the end of the day, it is the animal's owners that make the choice whether we're going to vaccinate that animal or not vaccinate that animal. Who are we to tell the parents of children that they must vaccinate their animals? They must vaccinate their children. Where do we get that right? I tell people, and I've answered I don't know how many hundred emails on this particular bill, I will vote no. But for goodness sakes, go out and vaccinate your children. It's the right thing to do. But it's your choice. Make the right choice. We can't take that choice away from people. It's their kids. I'm a no vote. Thank you.
Recognize Senator Arnie Roblin.
Thank you, Mr. President. I rise in favor of this bill, and I do believe that it still allows the rights of parents to make the decision. They just have a little education. I spent my life in education trying to help people make good decisions, and you make good decisions by getting the best information. That's what the bill requires. You know, as a young parent, a little older parent, my last child, my youngest child, was not protected by the herd, as we've heard before. In our community, for whatever reason, she was on her regular list of getting vaccinations. She ended up getting pertussis, whooping cough. And I will tell you, as a parent, you'll never forget when your doctors tell you, and they finally describe it. 2 other doctors said she couldn't have pertussis. We don't have that anymore. And when they heard her in the hospital, they said, oh, there's somebody here with pertussis. And they came down, and the whole community came and watched. And they told us that the chances of her survival weren't much different than the chances of survival 50 years before, because she has the disease and she has to work it through her system. To watch a 2- and 3-month-old child chest cave in while they're trying to get air, and you as a parent are trained to suck this stuff out of their throat, it is not something that I don't think any video will ever do justice for, but I will tell you that if you are a parent and you have to go through that experience, you become definitely engaged in trying to make sure your community understands that the safety of all of us is dependent on the safety of each one of us making good decisions with respect to vaccinations. So for 6 months, we learned how to slap our baby on the back with a little cut-off syringe thing to break the stuff up in her lungs, and we had monitors that allowed us to hear her breathing all night long and 24 hours a day for all those months. And that experience alone has made me convinced that as a society, if we don't try to take care of our children by getting enough of us vaccinated, we are not doing what we should be doing in society. So I urge an aye vote.
Recognize Senator Tim Knopp.
Thank you, Mr. President. Colleagues, I don't know if you've heard, but this majority report does not have a religious exemption in it. The exemption that exists in this bill is a broad exemption, and the specific religious exemption has been removed from law. That's what this does. That's what the goal of this bill is from the proponents, is to remove the religious exemption. You now are voting on a broader exemption, and you're forcing everyone, including religious minorities who do not agree with vaccinating their kids, visiting a doctor, taking advice from a doctor, to go through that exact same process that everyone else is going to go through. So I don't think anybody should be deluded into thinking that somehow there is still a specific religious exemption in this bill. And that's really what the minority report was about, just voted it down. So, you know, this body just voted to restrict religious freedom of religious minorities in favor of, call it whatever you want, the public good. You know, the goal is good, to protect the health of our kids and the health of our communities. That's a good goal. But when we're going to trample on the rights of other people to get to that goal, I think we really ought to think twice about it. I think we ought to do everything we can before you'd go to that, which we haven't done. So we should have moved toward education before we moved toward restriction. And that's why I'm going to oppose the majority report, or Senate Bill 132A.
Further discussion? Senator Hayward, do you wish to close?
President, I'd like to address some of the points that have been raised in the debate on this bill. I have to say, you know, with reference to this giving physicians the opportunity to play God, there are times I wish I could, frankly. I'd love to be able to wave a magic wand and get all my patients to quit smoking or eat healthy or do all the things that we know that are going to help them live a healthy life. I can't do that, and this bill won't allow me to do that about immunizations. It won't happen. My colleague from the coast here described his experience with his daughter having whooping cough. I've seen babies die from whooping cough in my career, and recently. I've seen outbreaks in neonatal intensive care units because some well-meaning grandparent brought another kid in who hadn't been immunized. And all of a sudden, we've got babies dying, our most vulnerable babies. I've seen elderly people hospitalized with pneumonia and broken ribs after getting whooping cough. I've seen children go deaf from measles, all because people had inaccurate beliefs about immunizations. Our children deserve better than that, and we can give them their parents that education. Now let me talk about a couple other points that have been raised. The first is the concern about risks and benefits. Page 2, line 1 of the bill that we're considering says explicitly that the education must include education about both risks and benefits. This will not be a whitewash. I can assure you this will be scientifically valid information. My colleague from Southwestern Oregon brought up the concern about the claims from the vaccine system. The vast majority of those claims took place prior to the new formulation of the whooping cough vaccine. I won't bore you with the details, but we moved from a cellular form where there were whole cells in the vaccine to an acellular form, which is markedly safer. And the rate of claims has dropped precipitously over the past 10 years since we made that change. With regard to the constitutionality issue, I would point out that it is constitutional. There are Supreme Court decisions, U.S. Supreme Court decisions, supporting mandatory immunizations and denying a religious exemption. The Prince versus Massachusetts decision stated that the right to practice religion freely does not include the liberty to expose the community to infectious disease. Parents may be free to become martyrs or victims themselves, but it does not follow that they are free to make martyrs or victims of their children. Massachusetts banned the religious exemption. This bill does not. Page 1, line 24 of the bill states explicitly that the parent may state that they are exempting their child from the immunizations for religious or philosophical reasons. This does not. We have an LC opinion that states explicitly that Senate Bill 132 in its current form does not take away the religious exemption. Finally, with regard to parental choice, believe me, that's the right thing. I've made choices about my children that their physicians haven't agreed with. I've done it based on the information I think is best for my child. Every parent should have that right, but they should do it based on accurate information. There is nothing in this bill that takes away parental choice, except the choice to get educated. It is not an unreasonable imposition. It is not a denial of religious liberty to require that people get accurate information so they can make an informed choice for their children. I urge your aye vote. Thank you.
The question now arises upon the third reading and the final passage of Senate Bill 132A. Those in favor of bills to pass, say aye. Those opposed, no. Clerk, please call the roll.
Rosenbaum? Shields? Starr? Steiner Hayward? Thompson? Whitsitt? Winters? Bertschiger? Bates? Byer? Boquist? Burdick? Close? Devlin? Dingfelder? Edwards? Ferrioli? George? Girard? Hansel? Haas? Johnson? Knope? Cruz? Modis Anderson? Monroe? Olson? Brzezinski? Roblin? President Courtney?
Yes.
Excused, Bertschiger, voting no. Boquist, Close, Ferrioli, George, Girard, Hansel, Knope, Cruz, Olson, Starr, Thompson, Whitsitt, Winters, 16 aye votes.
Senate Bill 132A received a constitutional majority is declared passed.